and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my July wrap-up. I did the reading rush as well this month, so I'm going to do my reading rush wrap-up and my normal July wrap-up. So this month I read a total of 11 books. So the first book I read this month was Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi. This book I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. So this book follows Sana and Rachel, and they are two people who start out not really interacting and not really knowing each other and kind of hate relationship, and Sana is dealing with the fact that she feels that she has to be perfect at everything. Rachel is dealing with the fact that she's trying to complete her final project for film. She's been trying to film a movie for a long time and it's just not happening, and she's running out of time for the deadline. In a twist of events, Sana ends up having to help Rachel and they kind of learn to get along, and it's a love to hate relationship book. So that's all I'm going to say so that there are no spoilers. I really enjoyed this. I found the romance really enticing. I found the familial elements really interesting and really relatable, and I felt that the emotions were described very well, and like I said, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So the second book I read this month was The Chalkman by CJ Tudor. This book is a thriller that follows a group of boys and one girl in the 80s who draw chalk messages to each other, and there is a murder and a body turns up and chalk messages are all over the scene of the crime. Then it flashes forward into current time, and we're following one of the boys in particular as he's grappling with a re-emergence of someone they were calling the Chalk Man, which is what they nicknamed the killer back in the day. So this is him dealing with him kind of reconnecting with his friends, putting everything together, figuring out what happened, and just solving a murder. It's kind of reminiscent of It or Stand By Me in that it flashes between a group of boys in the 80s riding their bikes and just being rowdy boys in the 80s, and also flashes forward into now, still dealing with the same problem that a lot of their issues and current problems stemmed from. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it, but I did still enjoy it, and it was just a nice thriller to read. It was pretty easy to read, and it was pretty quick. So the next book I read this month was Summer of Salt by Katrina Lino. This book follows a family of mostly women who live on this island that is really tiny, and once you're on the island you don't leave until you go to college, almost like Rumspringa for Amish people. And a lot of tourists are drawn to this island because of a rare bird that appears once a year and migrates over the island. This year there is a sibling duo that come as bird watchers, and the main girl that we follow and her twin sister each kind of have a crush on either of these people. It's kind of a coming of age story. They are about to leave the island for the first time in order to go to college, so it's a lot of closing off and looking at everything around them as familiar and how they're going to miss it, but also looking forward to the future. And I haven't mentioned yet that it does have a magical element. This family of women are known as magical people on the island, but the word magic isn't spoken. It's just known if you need something, go to this family. The main character that we are following, her magical powers have not arrived yet, and she's struggling with her identity and whether she belongs in her family because her magic has not come, whereas her twin sister's magic has begun to develop. So I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I found it a really nice coming of age story to read. I read it on the beach, so it was very, so Summer of Salt was a very good beachy read. It had romance, it was dealing with identity and coming of age, and it was just, it was overall just very enjoyable. So the next book I read this month was Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta. So I gave this book 2.5 out of 5 stars. I did find it very hard to follow, so my description of the plot might not be completely accurate. So there is a kingdom that the royal family was brutally murdered, and there were 5 days where the kingdom, the people and the royal family were attacked and systematically killed, and it is following this quite a few years later down the line, where we're following Finnegan as he teams up with a novice called Evangeline, and they are trying to find the prince with the help of Evangeline, who claims that she knows where he is. This does deal with some magic elements, some royal elements. It is a fantasy. It sounds like something I would really like, but unfortunately I didn't really enjoy it, mostly because I did find it very hard to follow. I don't know if it was just me at the time. Maybe I was just struggling reading. I did read the majority of this on an airplane, so maybe I was just nervous and couldn't pay attention to what the words said, or maybe it just wasn't for me. I might try to reread this in the future, but for now I'm not going to continue the series. So the next book I read in July was Katarina by James Frey. I read this because it was a book club choice by my friend. I have a lot to say about this book. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I don't usually give 1 star, so it was a 2 out of 5 stars for me. I took a lot of notes while reading this, mainly because I was just in shock at how the writer writes. If you've ever heard of the author James Frey, you know that there was a controversy with his book not being completely truthful and yet posing as a autobiography, even though the content wasn't what really happened in his life, and Oprah put it as her book club book of the month, and then discovered that it was all not real. So something I really didn't enjoy about this book, not only was the story quite boring, first I should tell you what the story is. So it's basically about a guy named Jay. The author's name is James. It's kind of like an autobiography, but fictionalized, so kind of what he did before with the controversy, but this time he didn't claim that it was an autobiography, you can just tell. So it follows him in the 90s in Paris when he was a blossoming author and just picked up and left and went to Paris with basically nothing and survived, and had a very lustful and passionate love with someone named Katerina. And then it also follows him in the present day as he hates writing because he hates the fame and he hates basically rich white guy stuff. He hates it all, even though that's what he wanted. He gets a message from Katerina and they start talking about their past, so it switches back and forth a little bit and is just basically an old rich white guy and his struggles with being an old rich white guy. So, other than the plot, what really bugged me was James Frey decided not to use grammar, and he decided that he doesn't want an editor for any of his books because he wants them to be raw and artsy. He doesn't use quotation marks or dialogue tags. And he doesn't use commas appropriately. I found that he very much flipped between his styles. So one page would be stream of consciousness with like 0 punctuation at all, and the next page would be in verse, and then the next page would be a normal novel, and then the next page was like sentences that were like 1 word. So after that book, that was very disappointing. I was so happy to have read a 5-star read, which was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuistion. Hey, sorry if the lighting is different, but my battery just died and I had to charge it and the sun is setting. Okay, we gotta do this fast. So, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuistion follows the son of the president, who is a female, it's not Trump, and a Prince of Wales, and they kind of have a rivalry going at the beginning of the book, but they discover that they like each other and they have to hide their relationship for political reasons and for the reasons that they haven't come out to their families or any of their friends yet. And it's following them basically falling in love. It's really, really cute. I absolutely love this book. The characters drew me in. The love seemed very real, even though it came from a rivalry. Hate to love books. You have to do right for them to work, and this one really worked. So the next book I read was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. So this book follows an all-girls school that's on an island, and a disease begins catching around the girls in the school, and eventually it's put into quarantine. And we are coming in at a time where it's been going on for I think a year and a half, and the school's population has gone down 50%. All of the teachers are dead except for 2 adults, and 50-ish girls are left. And they're basically just trying to survive. We follow the main girl and her best friend and someone that they became friends with just before the talks, which is what they call the sickness. So I gave this book 4 stars, maybe 3.7 to 4 stars. So I really enjoyed the story. I found it really intriguing. It kept me reading. I didn't want to put it down at any point and I didn't struggle to pick it back up. I think the only thing I didn't like about this book was I did have trouble connecting with the characters. They didn't seem very, not that a character has to be likable for me to enjoy them, but I didn't really enjoy the characters as much as I wanted to, so I didn't really care as much what happened to them. So the next book I read in July was Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This book was super cute. I read it when I was younger, and I actually read it during the reading rush this month for the book to movie challenge, and also a character that's not a human challenge. I didn't remember how depressing this book was. I found it very, very sad. It's basically about farm animals and figuring out they're going to die because they're farm animals, but I found this book very nostalgic and it brought me back to when I first read this book, and it was overall just a really sweet story, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think if I were to have never read this before and I picked it up today, it might have been like a 3 stars, but since it had that nostalgia factor, it got 4 stars. So the next thing I read in July was Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan. I really enjoy Saga by Brian K. Vaughan, so I just saw that it was by him and I heard a lot of good things about Paper Girls, so I picked it up. I did only end up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. I had no idea what the plot was about, so going in, I went in completely blind to it. I think the reason I didn't love it is because it did stand as a very introductory graphic novel. I think if I continue reading this, I will enjoy the following ones better, because this was just the introductory one, and the end of this this one caught me more than the middle and the beginning of it. So we will see where this goes. I will probably be continuing this and I will let you know my thoughts on it. So the next book I read in July was I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This book follows a non-binary character named Ben who just came out to their parents as non-binary, and their parents don't really react the best. That is in the first few pages is a coming out story gone wrong, which was very heart-wrenching to read, and this whole story kind of pulled at your heartstrings, especially for someone who is a part of the LGBTQ+ community. It was heart-wrenching, and it really made me think about what kind of literature about queer characters is available to young people on the YA shelves, on children's literature and things like that. How much availability is there? And that's why I am so happy that this book came out. I love that I now have something to recommend to people working with young people who identify as non-binary, as well as non-binary young people who might need to connect with a character, or who've never felt they could connect to a character, or who are having similar struggles to Ben in this story. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, maybe 3.5 out of 5 stars, not because it was bad, but because YA contemporaries and romances I do kind of struggle with a little bit, in the way that it takes a lot for me to really love it. And while I did love the message and I did love the representation and everything about this book, and I will be recommending it to people, YA contemporary romances just aren't usually my thing, and 3 stars is usually the rating I give them, but I did bump it up to 4. And the last book I completed this month was not really a book, it's like a middle grade graphic novel, but it still counts. So it's Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Search Part 1. So there are multiple graphic novels for Avatar. I think there are 12. So this is the very first one, I think. And I loved this show. I think the show this is based off of has the best character growth in any piece of media I've ever experienced. This is the one where the characters I really connected to, and I love each and every one of them in their own way, despite whether they're good or bad people. So this graphic novel was really touching in the way that it stayed true to the show, it stayed true to the characters. I could hear the characters' voices in my head saying what the dialogue was. I could see all of the storyline happening in this actually happening in the show, as this is a continuation of the show, which I found really cool because I was super disappointed when Avatar: The Last Airbender ended, as most people were who loved the show. So I will definitely be continuing with this series. I want to read it all right now, honestly. It's amazing. I can't recommend it enough if you loved Avatar: The Last Airbender. So of course this got a 5 out of 5 stars. And that is it for my wrap up. Here are my stats for the month. I read this many books, and I read this many pages, and this was my average star rating. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm so excited to see you in my next video. Bye!